Welcome back to What's Next class, Survivorship Edition. I'm Dr. Dave Bullis. I am the Director of Ambulatory Behavioral Medicine here at the clinic, and I am your host for Episode 5, What to Expect Emotionally in Survivorship. Won't come to any surprise for most of you that emotional challenges, those refer to any of the moods or emotional energy that people experience that it's related to cancer treatment experience, as well as returning to lives outside of the medical system. And this returning to one's life outside the medical system is really sort of the hallmark of the survivorship journey. And how do I get back to, quote, normal, unquote. And so one of the things I just want to put a plug in here is to say that emotions that you are having, they are normal. And emotions are a natural consequence of being alive. And so if you're alive, you will be having emotional experiences. So I say all that mostly because I want to make sure that we're not pathologizing and overdiagnosing the fact that people are anxious while they go through this process. Emotions are part and parcel of the cancer treatment journey. And if you're not having emotions, then that's probably also important for us to know. But 99.99999% of people have emotional reactions to the process. And so this episode is really aimed at sort of thinking about that and helping people think about ways to cope with that. One of the sort of analogs of the fact that emotions are a natural consequence of being alive is there's nothing that you're going to get from this episode that's going to make you happy about going through cancer treatment. And we're not going to be able to make emotions go away because, again, you are going to continue to be alive, so you're going to continue to have emotions. So I think it's important to recognize, these are normal things. We don't need to squash them or put them away. Really, the goal here is to have healthy ways of managing the emotional energy when it does come up. And you're not going to feel, sad or anxious or worried or mad or whatever all the time. It's really recognizing that when those emotions come up, you want to have as many different ways of managing them as possible. So what is normal? What's a normal feeling? How do I know if I'm, quote, normal or not? And normal feelings are ones that come and go, right? So if you're feeling sad for a moment, that's one thing. If you're feeling sad for 6 to 12 months, that's a different thing. So feelings are normal, and they're ones that come and go. And they're things like worrying about the unknown future, missing the good times from the past that seem kind of out of reach, grieving the loss of how relatively uncomplicated my life felt like before the cancer diagnosis, sadness that you have to go through with this at all. It stinks to have had it. Worrying about how this is all going to affect your partner, your children, your family, your friends, your colleagues, your future, whatever. Also things like envy or irritation with people who seem to have a healthy, and you can fill in whatever body part is affected. It's uncomfortable to be jealous or mad at people for being healthy, but it's not an uncommon reaction and actually makes sense. It's often common for people to feel like no one else gets it, like what it's like to be you right now, how you're supposed to be happy that you're done with treatment, but you still don't feel quite happy, and other people might not get that. You may find that feelings about other stuff, like your job or the current political situation or the weather or traffic on 128, all of those things, which are normal and they were going on whether one has cancer or not, but they may seem magnified. Your reaction may seem magnified right now. People oftentimes have a lot of issues around how their body is healing and whether it's going to be disfigured or rearranged or just feels fragile all of a sudden. Once you've had all the treatment, it just feels like your body has been beaten up and you feel delicate. That's a very common emotional experience. And then obviously there's the practical realities. There's a lot of worries about how am I going to pay for this all? And am I going to be able to afford it, or will it bankrupt me and my family? So that's a short list. I could never possibly list all the normal common experiences people have. But I would say those are some of the top ones that come up through my office. So when does normal transition into something that is something I should worry about? I should get actual treatment for it, and it's not just part of the normal process. And in general, the theme within, kind of the clinical world of psychology and illness and medical care in general is that if you feel like those feelings are beginning to interfere with your daily function. Again, if I'm sad that or I'm happy that the baseball team won or lost or whatever, that's a normal thing. It doesn't last very long, and then you kind of get over it. But if you feel like it's lasting for some time, like a month or 2 months or 3 months, then that's really something that we want to manage. And so some of the symptoms that are sort of related to depression or anxiety or if you're feeling like your sleep is really being disrupted, not for medical reasons, as we talked about in prior slides, but really just for emotional reasons. And that can be when you want to sleep too much or you can't sleep enough. There can sometimes be a loss of interest in doing your usual hobbies and activities, things that you used to be looking forward to, you just couldn't care less anymore. You may feel kind of you're getting down on yourself, like you've been beaten down one too many times and you're just not sure you're going to be able to get back up. Your energy level, which again, this is not just related to the treatment itself, but also just a profound sense that I not only do I not have energy, but I can't seem to get it back and it won't come back no matter what I do. You may be having a hard time thinking straight and getting distracted by the emotions. And again, we just talked about the mental challenges in a prior episode, but this is more just recognizing that my thinking is mostly distracted by emotional issues. Again, appetite or interest in eating. Some people finding that they're what they call emotional eating. So every time they get worried, they eat, and which means that they're gaining too much weight and it's not very healthy, or they're not eating enough. They just don't have the interest in eating. It just doesn't seem like it's worth the bother. That's a challenge that we want to address. And then this sort of sense like that you want to get up, that you have agency, that you have a drive to do something. Sometimes that's just missing. And for a lot of folks who have gone through the cancer treatment process, they have kept their eye on the prize and been very focused on getting through each day of treatment, which is actually very adaptive and very healthy. And then in survivorship, really have the time, and this is sounds like a perverse idea, the luxury of being able to take a step back from the whole journey. And that's when really the idea about avoiding death or even thinking about the future dying process becomes a thought process. Now, if that becomes something that's pervasive, that you just can't get it out of your head, again, not uncommon, but that's a sign that you've transitioned from just a normal worry about the future to something that's really going to becoming an interference or a barrier to you getting better. So again, if this goes on for longer than a week or two consistently, if it goes on for a month or two regularly, if you feel like this is a significant difference from the way you were before you got diagnosed, if other people are talking to you about it and asking you a lot about like how do you act or why are you acting that way or how you thinking or how you feeling, you seem really different. If you're hearing that a lot, that's a sign. If you find that any of these emotional things are getting in the way of you actually getting to follow-up appointments or taking part in work or other normal routines, that's a sign that it may be getting in the way. And or just in general, just complying with the treatment plan. I just don't have the energy or the drive to take my daily pill. That's something we want to know about. So what can you do about it? Well, certainly, and this is something that we can provide for you here through the clinic. Certainly within the community, is asking for a referral to a psychiatrist for medication management. And the medication, there is no happy pill, so let's just be clear that there's no magic pill here. But the medications for anxiety and depression really are aimed at some of the symptoms. So if it can help you sleep or give you better energy, improve your appetite, help your thinking be a little clearer, those are all ways in which medications help reduce the impact of anxiety or depression or any of the other emotions on your functioning. It is important when you talk to any kind of psychiatric provider or even just your primary care doctor. There are some primary care doctors and some medical oncologists who feel comfortable managing medications for depression and anxiety. Other doctors feel much less comfortable. So it's important to ask them first, just because you're going to see them more often. But if they are not feeling comfortable, that's when you want to get a referral to a psychiatrist. But when you talk to any medical provider about taking on an additional medication, you want to really have a good, thorough conversation about side effects. You want to be prepared for what the pros and cons are for any medication. Every medication has pros and cons. And so you really want to make an informed decision, because sometimes people realize, well, the medication that I thought would be helpful it's going to cause so many side effects. I'd rather just go to the gym and work out some of my anger on the weight machine, and then I won't need the medication. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. But the other piece to remember is that when you start taking a medication for depression or anxiety, certainly for depression, it can sometimes take up to 4 weeks for you to feel the full effect. And I think that's just important. There's no magic pill. So the psychiatric solution is really something that you're going to grow into over the next couple of weeks, or as soon as you can get the provider. So one of the key emotional components, and this is not about medication, this is just about coping in general, is to focus on what we have control over. What is true is that people who are coping well are focusing on the things they do have control over, and that's why they feel less anxious and less depressed. When we focus on the things we don't have control over, we tend to feel more overwhelmed. That is not just about oncology or any other medical issue. That is about life in general. But what is really true is that although we can't change the facts on the ground about whether you had cancer or not, we can help you focus on what you have control over. So we don't have control over what happens to us, but we do have control over how we respond to what happened to us. So one of the very, very common fears that people have when they're in survivorship is really this concept of the fear of recurrence. And obviously this is the idea, right? How do I know they got rid of the cancer? How am I going to know if it comes back? If it comes back, what am I going to do? All of those things. It's the most common reported fear of everybody who goes through the cancer journey and comes out the other side. And it makes sense, right? It has a rational component. There are statistics that your oncologist will quote about survivability and the probability that a patient with your type and stage of cancer, how long they have until it comes back, or if it never comes back, or any of those statistics. And so you are not wrong to wonder where in the statistical analysis you would fall. It's also true that those statistics are based on a population. They're based on hundreds and thousands and sometimes millions of people. So they are an aggregate, some sort of idea of what people do. They do not predict for you specifically what your future is going to look like. It can feel personal for sure, but it is really it's important to recognize that one of the emotional impacts of the fear of recurrence is that we have information that makes it seem like it's written in stone, that we have a 1 in 10, 1 in 50, 1 in 4 million chance. And in fact, those are statistics. And so that's both the good news and the bad news, right? So the truth is, as it always has been, that we can't predict the future, and all we really can do is just focus on what we're doing with our lives right now. So with the fear of recurrence, what can you do about it? Well, the first thing is use the coping strategies laid out in this episode, which we'll talk about in a minute. But basically, if you can touch it, you can control it. And if you can't touch it, you can't control it. So that's, if you ever have a really tough moment, just look at your hands and think about, all right, what can I grab? What can I do to help me feel like I have some control? What project can I work on? What place can I go? What dish can I wash even to make sure I feel like I have control? When you're thinking about fear of recurrence, one of the best ways to minimize that is to make it your business. to embrace all the medical treatments that are available to you. Your medical team is their job in life is to give you every tool possible to maximize your health and your longevity. So the more you embrace what they offer, the better your chances are of preventing any kind of premature recurrence of illness. If you put your energy into the healthy lifestyle options that you do have control over, and that's, again, we've talked about that before in earlier episodes about what you eat and how you move on a daily basis. Every time you eat well, every time you exercise, every time you take your medicine, you are fighting off that cancer. That is your daily activity that prevents cancer from coming back. It's not foolproof, obviously, nothing is foolproof, but that is one of the areas where you have the most control, and one of the best ways to reduce that fear of recurrence to its smallest level is to do things proactively that help reduce your cancer risk. Regular follow-ups, taking daily medication treatments, those are all, again, part of this effort for a daily fighting cancer. Once the cancer's gone out of your body and the doctors have told you there's nothing else we need to do right now, we'll see you in 3 months, it can be petrifying. But when you recognize that every day you're doing something to fight cancer, you yourself are doing something to fight cancer, that's the best way to manage that fear of recurrence. Again, if you truly feel like this fear is keeping you up at night, it's keeping you from going to work or coming to medical treatments, that is one of the best reasons to come see the psychologist here at the Cancer Center, who happens to be me, because customized coping strategies can be developed just for you based on what your unique strengths and weaknesses are. So here's the guiding principle. And this is a question I encourage everybody to ask themselves every day. And that question is, am I doing the best I can with what I've got right now to make the most out of today? It's just a way of reminding yourself that you are still in charge of you. You are still the one doing your life. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it is right now. And that is what is going to continue. The best I can. Those are all your core values, your strengths, your attitudes, your faith in a spiritual tradition, your family, their love for you, your love for them. Any characteristic or strength that you can think of, those don't change over time. So the first two parts of the question, am I doing and the best I can, are there to remind you you're still the same person you were before. And you will continue to be that person going through this. And when it feels like your life's been turned upside down, first by the cancer diagnosis, and then by the treatment, and now by survivorship, and the uncertainty that comes with that, it's good to know that your core bedrock capabilities are not going to change. However, the third part of the question is the with what I've got part. Now, since you're in survivorship, you already know that your energy level has ebbed and flowed and risen and fallen multiple times. So this is not going to come to a huge shock at you. But one of the things that happens for folks is that we set our expectations based on what we used to be able to do. And that's a trap because our bodies don't have the energy that we used to. So if you set your expectations based on your energy level rather than what people expect of you or what you used to be able to do, then you're going to have a lot more ability to not be so disappointed and recognize that you're actually giving yourself credit for the recovery that you're doing every day. So one of those things is if you set your expectations based on 100% like when you were 35, you're going to be disappointed every day. If you set your expectation based on what your body can do, so whether it's at 80% of normal or 50% of normal or 10% of normal, then you won't be so disappointed because you can give whatever your body has to give that day. An 80% day is going to look like a normal day. A 50% day is one of those days where you stay home and you kind of do projects around the house, but you don't go out to lunch or go see your friends or go shopping. And the 10% day or 15% day, that's when you lie on the couch and watch TV and you get to choose what program you want to watch rather than much else. right now, that's the only time we have control. But what is common, again, and normal for folks is people tend to think about a lot about the past and regret what they no longer have, or think about what might have been different if they turned left or turned right or whatever. And people also think a lot about the future, obviously, because that's where we, the providers, point you. But the idea is that the past and the future have one thing in common, and that's no control. We can't change either one. But in the present, we do have control. So you're going to feel the least amount of stress the more you keep your thought process and your focus on the here and now. So to make the most, when you bring your best efforts, you tend to get the best outcome. And the best outcome is really something that's going to be defined specifically for you by your medical oncology, radiation oncology team. So the best way to get that best outcome possible is really to focus on making the most of what you've got. And today, today's your day, right? Your treatment is day-to-day process. Today is the day when you have the most control. And although it's tempting to go back in time or think about the future, today is the day when you're going to feel the least amount of distress. So that's sort of the plan. Now, how do you do that? Well, I always joke there are only two things you need to do to deal with stress. Have a plan and follow the plan. Again, massive oversimplification, but this idea of if every time you're feeling stressed, you ask yourself the question, am I really doing the best I can right now to make the most out of today? Two things are going to happen. One is you're going to answer, yes, I think I am. So I need to give myself a break. Or you may be like, actually, I'm kind of not. Like, I could be doing more. So then that gives you an opportunity to get up and do more. So that's the plan. Again, remember this coping model, right? The physical health is at the bottom. We've gone over that. The mental or cognitive issues, we talked about those already. These emotional health issues that we've been going over in this episode are really at the top of the column, but they do have very clear effects on our cognitive ability and also on how we're feeling physically. So all three of these have interactions with each other, but that's part of what we're trying to do is help you really focus on how to help the best emotional health is by focusing on physical and mental health as well. So what's a coping plan emotionally? We talked about a treatment plan and the care plan from a chemotherapy perspective, which we went over in an earlier episode. What about emotional coping plan? And one of the ways, this is true about life in general, but if you want to make progress, it really helps to map out a plan to find your way. It's like having a map to get from point A to point B. And there are three aspects of that we think are important to focus on: goals, barriers, and strengths. So making a plan, if you have a goal, you're going to be more likely to achieve what you want if you've spelled it out ahead of time. It's hard to know where you're going it's hard to know how to go or which route to take if you don't know where you're going. So this is true in recovery as well. And sometimes it's helpful to write them down. So like, what are my physical goals? I want to get back to exercising now that I'm through with active treatment. Or what are my mental goals? I want to have a clearer plan about how I'm going to live my life. Or I want to make sure I keep my my treatment plan, sort of front and center, so I know what I'm working on every day. Or an emotional goal, like I don't want the worry about my future to stop me from living my life now, because I'm past the worst part of it, and I want to start making more of my life. So those are all examples of goals. The next thing we talk about were the barriers. And now there are always barriers that stop us from achieving our goals. Not permanent barriers, but they're just things that get in our way. And we know that because if we didn't have a barrier, we would have achieved the goal already, right? So the barriers are important to look at, mostly because those then become targets for us to treat medically, mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever. So a physical barrier can be something like, the medications make me feel weak or tired. That gets in my way. Or mentally, there's just so much stuff to understand. I don't know how to approach it. I just don't know what to do next. Or emotionally, since I don't know what to expect, I just feel like I'm anxious all the time. Those are the sort of the most common ones. But you can imagine that there are any number of barriers that you would come up with. Now your strengths, that's what we just talked about earlier, that's not going to go away, right? That's part of that key question, the guiding principle. So when you think about your strengths, you have ones already, like your core values, which we talked about, but then the good news is you also get to build new strengths. And that's part of what coming in for therapy, physical therapy or emotional therapy or learning new techniques can be all about. A physical strength can be, I know that if I walk a little every day with my friends, I'm slowly going to regain my function and keep my social strengths intact. Mentally, I know that if I have a good memory center in my house, I can get organized with my stuff, and that'll give me a system to keep track of all my appointments, and I won't be losing things or losing track of things, and that's going to help me feel better. And then emotionally, for example, like I know I have a strong faith and a work ethic, and that's always gotten me through in the past. So I just need to sort of maybe put my nose to the grindstone here and put a little work into getting back to normal. That's something I know I can do because I have a strong faith and work ethic. So that's sort of the idea. So the key here is to use your strengths to overcome your barriers so you can achieve your goals. So again, here's a nice, really complicated template you can use, and you can either try to print this off or just make a column on a piece of paper yourself. But here's an example of what that would look like. So one of my goals is to control or eliminate my cancer. And one of the barriers is I have to take the hormone treatments for the next 10 years, and that's kind of a pain. But my strength is I have strong family support, and my medical team is awesome, and I have faith and good work ethic. So my plan is I'm going to take that pill every day because that's my doing my part to fight this cancer. Another goal is I want to see my grandkids more often, or my kids. I don't know how old you are, but you know what I mean. But the problem is that they live in San Diego, and I live here in the Boston area. So one of my strengths is, my kids and I can buy a faster computer, one of those great big display screens, and they're going to teach me how to Skype with my San Diego family every Sunday. And that way I can see them, and I can also stay in touch with them. I want to get back to my normal level of activity. But one of the barriers is that the hormones I have to treat have a real effect on my body. They sap my energy. They make me feel kind of woozy sometimes. And so that's a problem. It's keeping me from doing much. Now, the Cancer Center, the strength is I have these people at the Cancer Center who can help me learn how to get back my strength. And so my plan is I'm going to ask for one of those strength and motion consults, and I'm going to make a daily plan on my calendar to walk every day. One of my goals is I don't want to look sick like a cancer patient. And I've been through the ringer. The chemo made me lose my hair, and I lost a lot of weight, and I look gross. And I hate it. And so that's a barrier for me because it makes me look like I'm sick, and I don't want to look like I'm sick anymore. And one of my strengths, though, is that the Cancer Center has a program to help me manage my look, and that's called Look Good and Feel Better. And I can ask for a consult with that. That's through the American Cancer Society. And that can help me think about how I present myself so I don't look so sick. And then also, I can do some of those other things like talk to a nutritionist and other things that help me get my body back. And then one of the things that's very common is I don't want my friends to treat me any differently. And now that I've been sort of labeled as a cancer patient, they all want to tell me what to do, or they have people tell me war stories, and it really drives me nuts. I don't want to be thinking of myself that way. And so one of the things I can do is I have this strength when now I have the Cancer Center has this staff that are here to help me think about teaching me coping skills to better manage how to talk to other people. So one of my plan is I'm going to learn how to talk to people and tell them what I do and what I don't need. And that's going to help me aim their good intentions more effectively and feel better. So here's an example here's some goals. Sometimes they're physical, sometimes they're mental, and sometimes they're emotional. And the idea is that by using my strengths, overcome my barriers, and I have an actual plan. I'm going to take my pill every day. I'm going to Skype with my family in San Diego every week. I'm going to get strength and motion. I'm going to go to Look Good, Feel Better. And I'm going to learn how to tell people what I need and don't need. That's putting me in the driver's seat. So that's a coping plan that I can do. And you can imagine there are any number of ways that you'd want to kind of play that out. So the keys to emotional coping that make any plan work is you got to practice it every day. You got to give yourself permission not to be perfect all the time, or even any of the time. It's really a work in progress. And you got to give yourself time to practice the plan. Some of these things you've already done, some of these things you're already good at, some of these things are brand new. So part of the process is just the more you practice it, the better you get. And then as you go through it, you may find that there are some things that just don't work. Like, I thought I could go to a yoga class every week. It turns out I'm not flexible. And I mean that in every sense of the word. And so I just can't go to yoga. I don't want to do yoga. I hate it. But I can do other things. So I get to adjust none of these plans that as I've written them out on paper and showed you the examples, they're not written in stone, right? So they're things you can adjust to over time. Add new goals when you've completed them, refine goals you don't like, stop doing things that are not working. Again, it's really, there are helpful staff here. Our social worker and our psychologist and other people here are really good at helping define coping strategies that will work. We can even find you a provider in your area that can help you manage it well as well. Also, if you don't want to come back to the cancer center, we have a massage therapist who can also do Reiki, and we oftentimes recommend that because your body has been a place where there's been this battle against the cancer going on. And sometimes it's nice to experience your body as a place of healing and a place of relaxation rather than a place of war. And the research has really showed that massage and Reiki, one of their main benefits, actually, besides the physical, is reducing anxiety and depression. So although it may not be about how you think or talk or whatever, it's a very direct benefit for your emotional wellness. So that's the end of Chapter 5. Thanks very much, and stay tuned for more episodes.